Ama and Sabadi Cup, and welcome to another episode here for the Fight Principles podcast, where we look into what we can learn from martial artists and apply to our everyday real lives. And over the last few episodes, we looked into actual fighters that are out there, what can we learn from them, and the legends such as GSP, George St. Pierre, Demetrius Mike Mouse Johnson. We also looked into famous martial artists such as Bruce Lee in the beginning, for example. And today, I want to take you back even further, actually. I want to take you back, way back into time. That's an old reference. I want to take you back to 1584. And while that's the time, the location would be Japan. And I want to talk about one of the probably most famous martial arts warrior philosophers, Miyamoto Musashi. You might have heard of the name before, Musashi. If you're taking any supplements, there's a famous supplement brand. I think it's from the Australia region, if I'm not mistaken, Musashi. And I mean, the reason why it's called Musashi is because of this man, the legend, Miyamoto Musashi. Joe Rogan also has a tattoo on his arm based on Musashi. So let's dive into what made this man such a famous figure in history when it comes to all things martial arts and fighting. And the question I always ask in the beginning of such episodes, in this case, it is, what happens when you dedicate your life to mastering yourself through the blade, the brush, and the body? Because that is what Miyamoto Musashi swore to do. And so he was more than just a swordsman. He was a strategist, a philosopher, an artist, and a teacher. And he was undefeated in over 60 duels. He lived in 17th century Japan, and left behind lessons that, I mean, you hear me talk about it today, that resonate far beyond the battlefield, even today in 2025. And in this episode today, we explore Musashi's life, mindset, and the timeless wisdom we can find in his book, The Book of Five Rings, and how that might apply to our lives. So very quickly, who was this guy, Miyamoto Musashi, right? He was born in 1584, as I mentioned in the intro, and during Japan's warring states period, a time of constant conflict and change, okay? So he fought and won his first duel at the age of 13, and then eventually he became a Ronin. Ronin were those masterless samurai. So samurai, they had masters, which they then followed around and obeyed them and so on. But he chose to become a Ronin and teach himself. So he chose the path of self-reliance and what we call now in literature wandering mastery. And over the course of his life, he engaged in more than 60 duels and remained undefeated in those duels. So he wasn't just a swordsman, though, because he had many talents, and he also was a painter, a calligrapher, and a writer. So he showed deep interest in things such as Zen Buddhism and, as you can see, artistic mastery, which is pretty impressive. And according to literature, he lived to a very strict personal code that was rooted in discipline, simplicity, and strategy. And while this is just the intro to the man, the myth, the legend that is Miyamoto Musashi, I think we can already see a takeaway here that we can apply to real life. And you can master many things, but only through mastering yourself first. So if you know who you are and how you learn, he knowing that he needs to be a Ronin and choose wandering mastery instead of following someone around, he mastered all those things. So you can master many things as well, but only if you master yourself first. And that leads me to something that made him the famous person he became. And duels, discipline, and the way of the sword. And his most famous fight, the fight that everybody talks about, was against Sasaki Kojiro was also a legendary swordsman, and Musashi arrived late to the duel on purpose, and he used a wooden sword carved from an oar and, according to the story, won with a single strike. And he said it was on purpose, and he emphasized improvisation, awareness, and mental superiority over just those brute strengths. He said you have to defeat your opponent before the fight even starts, and arriving late, taking him off his game, having a wooden sword, just took his opponent off his game, and that's why he could surprise him. He then also developed a different fighting style by himself, which is then called, I hope I pronounced correctly, Niten Ichi Ryu. This was this thing where you would wield two swords at once, like a katana and a wakizashi sword. Very unorthodox for Japan back in the day, and that's why it was so effective. And he said also in his writings that he rejects things such as comfort and routine, and reportedly lived in caves, trained alone, and tried to remain a lifelong student, so always tried to improve. And I think that's another takeaway we can see here, because many times we think that discipline equals routine, but Musashi showed us that discipline isn't just routine. It's the ability to walk your own path no matter how uncomfortable. So discipline does not mean routine. Routine doesn't equal discipline. Just because you do something over and over again doesn't necessarily mean you're disciplined. You can also be disciplined if you walk your own path, if you go somewhere where you have never been before, do something you've never done before, no matter how uncomfortable it is. That could also be discipline. Always trying new things, different things, uncomfortable things. And I think that's something that we should also do in real life, not only doing things that we're used to, but putting us in situations where we have to do new things. Let's move on to what made him so famous, like this book, the Book of Five Rings, a guide to, from my point of view, life and, well, obviously combat. And Musashi wrote this book toward the end of his life. It's like a collection, thoughts on strategy, mindset, personal growth. And he divided it into 5 different scrolls. And the first scroll is called the Earth Scroll. It's about foundations of martial arts and understanding the bigger picture. And one quote from that scroll is, "You must understand that there's more than one path to the top of the mountain." Incredibly powerful if you just think about it. The second scroll is called the Water Scroll. And this is all about adaptability, fluidity, and reflection. And a quote from this scroll is, "In strategy, it is important to see distant things as if they were close and to take a distance view of close things." Pretty cool, right? 1700 Japan, pretty cool. Third is the Fire Scroll. It's all about conflict and combat, intensity, tempo, and initiative. And very short quote, powerful though, "You must strike the enemy's spirit." I love this one. Like, very applicable in combat or in other intense situations. The fourth is the Wind Scroll, all about understanding other schools and opponents so that you can adapt. And he says, in this scroll, to know 10,000 things, know one well. What does it mean? Think about it. And the last one is the Void Scroll. It's about emptiness, the spiritual aspect of mastery, like intuition, detachment, and clarity. And here's the quote: "In the void is virtue and no evil. Wisdom has existence. Principle has existence. The way has existence. Spirit is nothingness." That pause was on purpose so you can think about it. Take away from just thinking about those scrolls, thinking about this Book of Five Rings. A strategy is not just for battle. It's for life. And you must know yourself deeply, act decisively, and I think it's very important that you also adapt fluidly, just what he mentioned. But let me know what your takeaways are from the Book of Five Rings. Maybe you can add something to that. If we look deeper into what made Musashi Musashi, we can look at his mindset. And I think one key takeaway here is that he chose the path of constant self-refinement. And he lived a life of minimalism. No luxury, no fame chasing, just a path. And he was undefeated. He could have lived in luxury. He could have been like, hey, look at me, I'm so good. But he chose the opposite. He embraced loneliness. He embraced silence. He embraced the struggle as part of growth. And he constantly practiced, not just swordsmanship, but also all the other things. Painting, poetry, calligraphy, sculpture. Amazing. Because he saw all those arts as interconnected. So for him, the way of the sword is the way of life. And I think looking at that, how he practiced painting, poetry, all those things to improve his swordsmanship, it shows us that we hopefully can learn something. And for me, that is, if you seek mastery, you gotta be willing to sacrifice comfort. You gotta be willing to sacrifice ego, and you got to be willing and able to sacrifice and get rid of distraction. Only then can you really master something, and not just one thing, but many things. And if you master all kinds of different things, you will get better at one thing at a time as well, just like Musashi. So if we look back at the last 12 minutes now that we talked about Musashi, and see how can we actually apply this, right? To wrap it up one more time. What's the learnings for real life? How to apply Musashi's teachings to today? So the first thing I want to say is that you have to fight your own duels. Yeah, your duels might not be physical, but they're still real. Whether it's your career, health, relationships, self-doubt, we all have those duels that we have to fight. And we have to fight them. We can't ignore them. So fight your duels. And if you stop running away from them, you will overcome them. Be comfortable with discomfort. Get up early. Sit in silence. And I hate that too. Train when it's inconvenient. That's that Musashi mindset. And I'm laughing a little, you might have heard that, because I just talked about it with a training partner the other day. Right now, here in China, it's getting really hot again, it's humid, and it's tough in the gym. We're in outdoor Muay Thai gyms here. It's hard, it's hot, it's hard. Then there's the pollution. You're sweating, you can't breathe, and we're just smiling. Because of course it sucks, but it's good. Because you want that. Because if you train like that, you gotta be ready for anything. So train when it's inconvenient. Sit in silence. Train your mind. That's the mindset that will help you to be a step ahead of the rest. Don't just specialize, deepen. Yeah, whether you're a writer, a coach, a student, an entrepreneur, whatever you are, mastery comes from consistent, focused practice. So it's not enough to just specialize on one thing. You have to practice it over and over and over again. Otherwise, yeah, you're a specialist, but you're not good at what you're specializing on. So mastery comes from consistent, focused practice. Show up to practice. One of my favorite learnings from Musashi, probably every time I think about it, is detaching from noise. And Musashi didn't care what others thought. He didn't do anything for validation. He didn't need validation. And in today's world, where we get validation everywhere, where we're looking for validation everywhere, that's an incredible rare strength if we don't need it. So detach from all the noise. Don't do stuff for Instagram, TikTok, whatever. Don't do it for validation. Do it for yourself. If you can do that, you unlock a strength that not many of us have in this day and age. Last thing, know the void. As sometimes the biggest breakthroughs come not from thinking more, but from letting go. And trusting intuition, accepting stillness. Know the void. Incredibly difficult, I know. Incredibly powerful if you can do it. Know the void. Trusting intuition, accepting stillness. And if you do all those steps before, you're fighting your own duels, be comfortable with discomfort, deepen, detach from noise, then you can trust your intuition. If you're always distracted, if you're listening to the noise, if you don't practice, if you're not being comfortable with discomfort, then you cannot trust your intuition. But if you do all those things before that we discussed the last 15 minutes, if you do all those things, then you can definitely trust your intuition, because then your mind is sharp. Now, last life lesson here. Obviously, you don't have to live in a cave to follow Musashi's path. But what you do need or should do maybe is simplify sometimes when it's possible, focus, and just show up every single day. Show up, show up, show up. If you show up, you have a huge advantage over those who don't. And you know yourself, you don't feel like showing up every single day. But if you do, you outwork those who don't. So in conclusion, like, what can we learn from Miyamoto Musashi? Mastery might feel lonely at times because not everybody is showing up, but it's very powerful. You are your own sword. And you have to sharpen your own sword yourself daily. You cannot not show up. Okay? And the last thing I want to say here is, it's like my kind of mantra when I think about Musashi. It goes like this: adapt like water, act like fire, see like wind, live in the void. I say this a lot when I'm on the way to train, when I'm on the way to business meetings, maybe even when I'm at work. For me, that's one of the more powerful things to think of when I think about Musashi and learnings from his life and his writing. So, to wrap it up, Musashi's sword wasn't just for fighting, it was for cutting away ego, distraction, and illusion. So now I'm curious to hear from you, like, can you apply anything of that? And what do you think, what parts of your life might need some sharpening maybe even? Yeah, let me know your thoughts. 5 principles on all the social media, or just leave some comments over here. If you listen on Spotify, that's also very helpful. As always, your follows, your likes, your shares, and all those things are very much appreciated. And I can't wait to talk to you again soon. Until then, stay sharp, show up, and we talk soon. Sawadee Cup. Chama.